What's up, guys? Shawnthebro here, and today we are going over how to do multiple inputs and commands. So how to do inputs that can be for multiple commands, essentially. We'll load up our fancy level here from Shadow Magnus. And yeah, so we're going to see how we can have several inputs or several commands that we can access at one time. So last time we had a temp command that we had to press ABC to do. I've now switched ABC to perform this action instead of the kidney hit, so we're a little bit more formal. And then we also have a new action we can use called ABD. He does this. So now we have two commands we can use, and our inputs and our input buffer will be checked against each of them to come to a solution. So there we go. This episode, this is part 3 of the input buffer series, so if you want to see the first part, then I'll link that right here in the iCard in the top right corner, and that'll bring you to the first part of input buffer so you can kind of see how we've got to this point. Okay, so we're going to start with the code today. Most of it, again, is going to be in the code today. This one shouldn't be as long as the second one because we're just moving everything over from a one-command system to an array of commands. I didn't want to do this last time because I felt it was too complex for one episode. There was a lot going on already in the logic. Okay, let's go ahead and go from the top. We'll kind of cover everything and let you know what we changed. So last time we had an F command, which is what we made our temp command into. Our temp command was an instance of this F command structure. Now we had a name and inputs, but we also had a boolean outside called something like has used command. What we want to do is change that and put a boolean has used command inside of the structure. So if you're able to do that, if you're able to put one in there, you're able to check every command to see if it's been used, as opposed to trying to make like 40 different variables and confirm that they were used through a boolean. And that's what we're going to do. So if you have 15 commands, you don't want 15 individual booleans that you have to keep track of. You just want to grab the index of our T array that we have of our commands, and then we want to grab and see if that one was used or not. Simple enough. So go ahead and add this to your structure. You can go ahead and remove the other boolean. It was at the bottom here. You might not want to do it yet since it is linked in your animation blueprint. You might want to wait until we can switch it over, but just know that that boolean is no longer going to be used by the end of this tutorial. Okay, so I don't make any other variables in this episode. What I do is I change this temp command that we had, our F command temp command, to our T array of F commands, and I call it character commands. So this is, we don't need the temp command anymore. We just want to have an array of them. I think that's reasonable and fair. T arrays are accessed quite quickly as well. So in terms of performance, this is one of the better elements we could use. Okay, so once you have your character commands, we can go over and start switching some things. So in the constructor, in your CPP of your fighter template character. Now, we were going over setting all this stuff to be ABC and giving it a name like temp command in the constructor. Great. We're still going to do that. We're still going to set it up so you can see them all out here and change it. I'm going to do it slightly differently now since we have an array, of course. So I'm going to add the number of commands we have to the array in the constructor. So instead of just saying, okay, you know, character commands is size 10, I'm going to add my exact amount because we're setting them all here. There's no reason to take up extra space here. If we need more, if we need 15 commands, great, then set the number to 15. It's that simple. But there's no real reason to like try and reallocate this or set this to some random number unless like players can input their own commands. And I mean, I don't think that is something that is going to be done. If we're going to do something like that, we could figure that out later. But for now, I mean, this can all be static. This is all back-end stuff just to make sure that our characters can do the commands they want. Remember, in our mutant character, when we have all of our child classes, our children classes of this fighter template character, we will be able to differentiate what attacks they have. And we'll probably won't have any commands in the actual parent class. They will all be in the child classes. So there you go. But for now, I'm going to put them all in here just because this is where all of our logic has been going. And to be honest, it doesn't matter if this goes to mutant or not, just for demonstration purposes. So remember to remove your Boolean references of your old Boolean if you deleted the Boolean. The temp has used command Boolean. If you have, we're going to be switching it over to this anyway. So this system, like I said, what this does is this reallocates the number of elements we have in this container. So for character commands, it's a T array. Calling set num adds 2 elements to the array because by default it's got 0 in it, so it's empty. Well, first of all, when you go to add an input in the T array, if you go to reference it like this, like 0 or 1 here, this is grabbing this index of the T array. So this is grabbing the first index, because the first index is 0, and this is grabbing the second index, because the second index is 1. So you could check if it's valid beforehand, and it wouldn't crash. But if you do this like I'm doing it without checking if it's valid, this will give you a crash if nothing is in the array. Fine. Again, we're not really doing any of this array stuff dynamically, so I don't see any reason why we need to check if it's valid and waste the time doing that when in reality we can just set all the variables here. So I think you just set num, figure out how many commands you want to have. I want to have 2 in this case. Then grab their indices, 0, 1, 5, 15, whatever. Then you can set all their parameters. I'm setting the name to command 1 and command 2. I'm setting their inputs to the key order that I want to press, the string that I want to input. So ABC, ABD. And then I'm setting has used command to false because we have not used their command yet. Not when we first start the level and the actor spawns. Okay, so we want to scroll down. We want to go to, if I could find it, I didn't realize it was this far down. We have written a lot of code. Go all the way down to our input buffer functions. Now, if you remember last time, we had this add input to input buffer function, where when we press the button, add the key that we pressed, or the button that we pressed, to the input buffer, and then checked for commands. Now, that's good. We had a pretty beefy function here to check for commands, but we're going to switch it up even more so. Don't worry, it's not going to change all that much from last time, but I'm going to go over the entire function again. I won't go into it in as much depth since it took us about an hour of going over it last time to cover it, but I do want to go over it pretty thoroughly so you guys understand what's going on now that we've changed it to an array. So, we still have our counter, correct sequence counter. This is our correct amount of inputs in a row to perform a command. For example, if a command has 3 inputs like ABC and we performed AB, our correct sequence counter will be 2. If the correct sequence counter is equal to the amount of inputs in a command, then that means we've successfully performed that command, and thus we should go ahead and call this start command function. Keep this at 0, and now we need to do an additional loop. We need to add one more loop on top of everything. This is a loop to loop through all of our character commands. So character commands is our T array of F command structures. This is what we were just setting up in the constructor. What it does is looping through this gets us each individual command. So this is a for each loop. That's what this syntax is. You can see auto current command, or you can put F command here, current command, colon the container you're grabbing from. That's a for each loop essentially. So it's going to go through the character commands, and just every time I use current command, this is going to be the correct index of the character command that we're on. What I mean by that is the first time this goes through, the very first index in character commands is our ABC, command 1, and false. So this entire structure gets broken out of this array, and this is what we have. So current command is equal to these things. And then current command, once the loop finishes and goes on to the next one, will be equal to these things, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we're going to loop through our commands, and then we're going to check against our inputs like we already were. So this part's the same, but I want to show you what's slightly different. It's just the way we have to word this. So I'm still going int command input equals 0. We're starting our integer at 0. We're checking to make sure that the command input is less than the number of inputs in the command, but wait a second. Remember, different commands could have a different amount of inputs, so we can't just do temp command.inputs.num or anything like that. We have to do current command.inputs.num. We have to make sure we're looping through the appropriate command's inputs. Otherwise, we'll get an out of bounds error and crash, so we don't want that. So make sure you switch this to current command.inputs.num. Then we're still adding to command input. Then we're doing another for loop. We're saying input. So command input is the individual input at that point in the for loop for the command. So index 0 for command 1 is A. Index 2 for command 1 is B. Index 3 for command 1 is C. So that's what that is looping through, remember. Now input is what we've input in our input buffer. It's looping through the individual buttons or keys in that. So if we press QXB, then input is 0 for our input buffer, it's Q, input is 1, it's X, and input is 2, it is B. Okay, so we start input at 0, we make sure it's still less than our input buffer.num, and then we add to it. This is the same as we were doing before. Then we make sure that if our input plus our correct sequence counter is still less than our input buffer.num, we're good to go. Otherwise, we want to fail out because the player could not have yet finished their sequence and reset the sequence counter, which we were already doing last time as well. Here's where things start to get quite a bit different. It's the same logic, but again, we have to use different stuff. We have to use our current command everywhere. So when we're doing our check to see if the input buffer with our input index plus our correct sequence counter dot input name is equal to the current command's input with their index, we are using our current command instead of our temp command. Remember, this matters. I'll bring up what did I bring up the last time? Paint. Okay, so we'll do a quick demonstration again. This won't be as long as last time, but let's say current commands. So I'm going to call character commands CC. Character commands is CC, and that's a terrible CC, but that's what this is. This has 2 indices. It's got a size of 2, okay? And then current command, so I'll say cur_C equals 0. Okay, these are our defaults here. Then I want to point out what the commands are. So command 1, that'll be C1, is A, B, C. And then C2, command 2, is A, B, D. Okay. There we go. Now lastly, let's put our input buffer down here. IB, input buffer, is ABC. Now let's do ABD that way, because you guys already know how it works with ABC. Let's do it with ABD. Okay. So we'll walk through this at this point, because I think it'll be confusing otherwise. So lastly, current sequence counter, because I forgot about this, current sequence counter equal to 0 by default. Okay, I know this is a little rough, but we got all this information in, right? We have 2 commands in our character commands list. We're starting at current command is 0, correct sequence counter is 0. Our input buffer is APD, and our commands are ABC and APD. So we're able to use command 2, but I'll show you why. Let's go over it step by step. Okay, current sequence counter is 0. it grabs the command that we want to use, current command and character commands. Now, technically, it grabs index 0, the size of a container. Like, character commands being size 2 has 2 indices, 0 and 1. Don't let it fool you. 2 is not an indice. It's not an index there, okay? You have 1 less of your size than you do for your indices. So if you had a size of 5, you would have 0 through 4. You wouldn't have 5. So current command being 0, and this being a size of 2, is grabbing the first index. It's 0. So we have ABC. So our input buffer is ABD, and our current command is ABC. So it's going to fail. We'll go over it. You ready? So let's loop through our inputs. Whoops, I forgot I can't actually click it with this open. So command input of the current command 0 is A. So the first index 0 of the current command is A. Then we loop through our input. The first index 0 of our input buffer is A. We say, okay, this if check does a compare and say is 0 plus 0 of the input buffer, which is A, equal to our current command dot inputs, command input, which is 0, which is A. They are equal. So we go into the log, we say the player add another input to the command sequence, and we add to the correct sequence counter. Then the correct sequence counter is only 1 when the current command inputs is 3. So it's not equal. We break. We go back into the loop. Now, when we break here, we don't break all the way out of all these loops. So we're going to go to here instead. We're going to change the command input. So we break out. We go back into here. Command input is now 1. 1 is still less than the number of inputs. So we're good to go. We've got 3 inputs here. 1 is still less than that, so we're good. Then we want to go to our input buffer and check that. Also, that'll restart at 0, but we have a correct sequence counter to increment it. So for our command input, we're at index 1, which is B for our current command. Then we go to our input buffer. An input buffer plus the correct sequence counter. So 0 plus 1, since we got 1 correctly. And let me change this, my fault. How do I erase? Okay. So we have this. That's a 1. Pretend that's a 1. There we go. So we have 0 plus 1. The index of our input buffer of 1 is B. And we compare that to our current command's input container at command input index, which is also 1, because this for loop, this is the second time it's going through. So it went 0, 1, which is also B. So player add another input to the command sequence, correct sequence counter increases. Now it's 2. Yeah, that's terrible. We can't have that. Hold on. That is terrible. Okay, 2. There we go. Now we break because 2 is less than 3. So they're not equal. So we can't call start command yet. So we go back into here. Command input is equal to 2. So command input is still less than current command inputs because current command inputs would be 3. We add to the command input. So yeah, it's 2 now. Okay, so, or it becomes 3 after that technically, but it's 2 for what we're using it for. So, input. We make sure that our input goes back to 0, which it does. Then we make sure that our input plus our correct sequence counter, which is now 2. 0 plus 2 is less than our input buffer.num. Input buffer has ABD in it, which is 3. So, we go ahead and check if 0 plus 2, which is 2, of the input buffer, their name, so index 2 of the input buffer is D. 0, 1, 2. So index 2 is D. If we compare that to the first one, which we're doing here, current command input's command input of 2 is C. So they are not equal. So then we go into this else and say the player broke the command sequence. At that point, the current command inputs will no longer be big enough. You'll see command input will increase, and this will become 3. And then 3 is not less than 3. So this fails out. It says, okay, 3 is no longer less than 3. We're going to go back to this for loop. Okay? So we reset our correct sequence counter back to 0. I'll just leave it as a little... Now we'll write it. Back to 0. But then we continue the loop, right? And so we're no longer on... The current command is no longer 0 because this loop restarts. So now we go to the next command in character commands, which is index 1. That's something. I'm just going to remove the 0 here. There we go. Index 1. Okay. So let's start this over. This time we'll go a little bit faster. Okay, so the command input. So command input is 0, but we're looking at command 2 now. So 0 is less than 3. We're good to go. So we're using index 0 of command 2, which is A. We're using index 0 of our input buffer, which is A. 0 plus 0 is less than the input buffer's length. So then we do that, and we check their indices. So input buffer 0 is A. Command 2, index 0, is A. So they're equal. Player add another input to the command sequence, add to the correct sequence counter. 1 is not equal to 3, so we break and we'll restart the loop. Now, let's go ahead and reset our correct sequence counter. 1. Okay, do it again. Command input now becomes 1. So index 1 of command 2 is B. So then we do the same thing with our input. So we start at input 0. We look at 0 plus 1, less than 3 for our input buffer length. Then we say if input buffer 0 plus 1, which is index 1, is equal to index 1 of command 2. Command 2's index 1 is B. Input buffer's index 1 is B. So they're equal. Player add another input to the command sequence, add to the command sequence counter, and then 2 is not equal to 3, so we break. So this updates. 2. Imagine that's a 2 now. There we go. That's a 2. So, one last time, command input now goes to 2. So 2 is less than 3, so we're good to go. Input buffer resets at 0, but then we make sure that 0 plus 2 is less than our input buffer num, which is 3. It is. So 0 plus 2, index 2 of the input buffer is D. We check if that's equal to index 2 of the second command, which is D. And they are equal. Player add another input to the command sequence, add to the counter. And this is 3 now. So we'll just cross this out and write 3 next to it. Good enough. So command sequence counter is 3. Or correct sequence counter is 3, excuse me. Correct sequence counter 3 is equal to current command inputs.num. There's 3 inputs in current command because we're on command 2. So 3 is equal to 3. We can start the command. I know that took a bit of time, but that should explain what you were missing from episode 1 of this, or episode 2 of this, I should say, where we went over only temporary commands. Now we can loop through an array and perform the same actions. So I apologize for the lengthy explanation. Hopefully I didn't confuse anybody, but that's how it works. We're going through one at a time, checking letter by letter, but when we fail, we don't instantly exit the loop. We have to go into the next command and see if they were actually inputting. They were putting in inputs for that command. There's some optimizations you could do here where you actually only check at all if it's the right number of inputs for that command and things like that. I'm not going to get into that today. I probably will end up adding that, but I think this is sufficient for now just to have the functionality in, and I think it's pretty clean personally. Now, we don't have many changes, but we do have to go over what we did in start command to make sure we're using the right attack. Because before we were just checking if the name was equal to temp command's name. But now we have to make sure when we call start command that our name is equal to the name of the command we want to use. So, start command still takes in an f-string name. But now, instead of passing it temp command.name, or a hard-coded name, we're going to pass in current command.name. So whatever command this completed on. So if we completed this during the first iteration of this for loop right here, current command would be command number 1. If we complete it on the second iteration, this would be command number 2, because you can see I've called them command number 1 and command number 2 respectively. So with that, we'll pass in those names to the start commands and temp command. So this will either be command number 1 or command number 2. And we could do like a switch statement or something like that to kind of fill it in and get the functionality we want. But I think a better way is to just use the Boolean that we have in there, check if we've used command, and then know what index we want to use for which attack. Sure, it adds a little bit more work to our end, but it removes some work from the computer's end, which is good. We can take a little bit more work for our friend the computer here. So in start command, we're going to loop through our commands, and we're just going to compare. So current command equals 0, current command is less than character commands.num. We're going to compare and make sure that the name we received, command name, is equal to this index of current command, their name. So I might have to write this down as well, but what this looks like is we're grabbing current command of 0. So index 0 of our character commands T array is command number 1, ABC, and index 1 of the character commands array is command number 2, ABD. So command 1 and command 2. We check our command name and just compare it if it equals to character commands the index we're on, either 0 or 1, their name. And if they are equal, that's what equal equals 0 means, then we perform the logic. So in this case, if current command was 0 and we called start command on the second iteration of this for loop, on the second index of this, which is ABD, which is command 2, then we'll go over this logic. So command.compare, this is command number 2, and we compare the first index, so index 0, .name. They're not going to be equal because index 0 of character commands is command number 1. We're looking for command number 2 here. So then this for loop would continue. It would go to current command 1, which is still less than character commands.num, since character commands.num is 2. And we'll say, is command number 2 equal to index 1 of character commands, which is command number 2. So their names are equal. So the command we were using is command number 2. So we'll print this long to prove it. The character is using the command name, which is command number 2 in this case. Then we're going to go character commands current command. So we're using our for loop index. So this will be 1 since we found it on the second command. And we'll say has used command equals true. So we've proven that the character has used the second command in our character commands array. There you go, guys. That's how you can set that up in the code. Now we do have to do some logic to understand what move we want to use in the blueprint and all. But that's the code logic changed for multiple commands. Let's go into the blueprint. So I'm going to look at I think it's the mutant character BP first, just to show you guys. I haven't done anything with this. I just want to show you. This is the same, so don't worry about changing this. The stuff above this is unrelated. It's from other episodes and stuff. So you don't need to change anything in here, like I know we did last time, but I just want to show you it's all the same, so don't worry about that. The anim BP is where we have to change some logic. So we go into our mutant anim BP here. Okay, so there's a few things we've got to do here. I'm going to sit up for this one. Now, let me find exactly where it's at, because we've got, okay, here we go. So, the way we have to set, where's the start and command transition? Okay, here we go, we're good. So the way we have to set information in the commands and also remove them from the commands is a bit different from how we do regular variables. So what I mean by that is we're setting the booleans inside the structure of the character commands array in the code to true once it found that we are using the command that we said we're using in the start command function. But we have to set those booleans back to false when we're done using the attack. So if you go into your state machine, you can go ahead and add 2 more states, or however many states you have for however many commands you have. Command 1, command 2, all good. So I can only go to command 1 and 2 from idle, and they can only return to idle to keep things simple. So idle to command 1. You can see that I'm using my basic start attack transition for command 1. So this is going to set all my booleans properly, reset all my variables, things like that. So nothing special here. The only thing is we have to look out for the transition rule and how to get it. So this is what I was saying about doing a little bit more work on our end. Now, you could do some stuff to loop through and see if it's equal to the state name or something like that. But I think it's much easier to just know that index 0 is the attack we're trying to use here for command 1. If you have a lot of attacks and they have really fancy names, this might not be the easiest way to do it. But if you have access to the code and you can see where the names are written down, like I can go, okay, command 1, this is the state I'm in. I'm in command 1. And I can see that this is index 0 in the array. So since I know this, I can just go grab index 0 here to access it. But our transition rule from idle to command 1 is we grab our mutant character reference and then we grab our character commands array. So make sure that your character commands array that we made, that was your temp command in the past, is edit anywhere, blueprint, read, write, and you've built in Visual Studio and you've compiled in Unreal. That way you can get it to Unreal. So grab our character commands array, get the index of the boolean you want to check. Remember, we have the has used command in that structure now. So index 0 is command number 1. Say, have we used this command? If we have, we can enter command 1. Command 1 is just an animation, play rate of 2, and it looks like this. I've set up the anim notifies like we've gone over in plenty of other episodes, so this is how I can spawn my hitboxes and all. But that's his command number 1. Now, command number 2. Basically the same logic. We go from idle to command 2. You can see, you can see that I don't have any special logic here, just start attack transition gets called. Command 2 is this attack. He's also got his anim notifies. And you can see in the transition rule, I'm just doing the same exact thing, but I'm grabbing index 1 of character commands to perform this action. So if character commands index 1 has used command is true, then go to command 2, which makes sense because command 2 is ABD index 1. All right. Now all we have to do is send them back once we're done. But this one's a little bit more complicated. So command 1 to idle. I do have my automatic rule-based, all this stuff that we usually put on sequence player and state. Automatic rule based on sequence player and state, mouthful. I do have that checked, and I do also have this end command transition, which is a new one now. We're still going to go through the logic of the end attack transition, just in case we want to. You could actually remove it, but I'm doing it as a safeguard. I'll show you why. But end command transition is going to be like the end super transition, like this guy right here. Remember where we added additional logic? We're going to do that to each of these. You can see command 1 to idle and command 2 to idle both use it, and they both use automatic rule based on sequence player and state. So command 1 and 2, also important to note, they don't have anything in their transition rule. It's just the automatic rule based. So let's look at what end command transition is. So when you type an event in here, just in case you forgot, just type whatever and hit enter. It will automatically make an event for you. So if you go back into the event graph, you can see this is where my end command transition is. To access this, just type end command transition or whatever it is that you are using, whatever you called it, and hit the event anim notify, and it'll pull up this for you. Do that, and then we'll go over the logic of how to remove or reset all the booleans for all the commands so that we know we're not using them. Grab your mutant character reference, get your character commands array, loop through all of them. So drag off of your character commands for each loop, just this one, which we've done before. But then drag off your array element and do something called set members in command right here. Okay? And you can see I have a set members in command here that looks slightly different. It has the struct reference and then has use command. When you click on a set members function, then you can go over to the right here in the details panel, pin options, input, and choose the ones you want to see. So only choose the ones you're going to change. I'm not changing the names or the inputs. I just want to reset the Boolean to be false when the attack is done. That way it doesn't get stuck in a looping state of using the attack. So that's how you get that done. But this set command, or excuse me, this set members is how you set members, how you set variables within a structure. It's important to note because, okay, you're like, I have a structure, I can just set it here, right? Nope, you can't. Because of the way structures work, you need to use the set members in command. But that's okay. Just go ahead and call set members in command. Make sure you set has used command and then set it to false, so just leave it unchecked. It'll be false by default. Then, in that loop body, you also want to... Oh, and I just realized I could make this better by doing this on completed. So we're going to do that now. See? You live and you learn. Then, once we call our set members in command, we want to call something called set array element. So for this, you'll want to drag off of your character commands as well and hit set array elem. There you go. So I'm going to delete this one since I already got one, but that's how you get that node. Now, it takes in an index of the array. It'll already have the target array because that's what we just were dragging off of, the character commands. And it takes in an item. So what's happening here is we set members in the command, great. But when we do a for each loop, we're not actually accessing the individual component. So when we do a for each loop, it makes, it brings out, here. Remember when I said, like, index 1 of character commands, we were using the current command variable, and it set all these things equal to current command? Well, that's exactly what it's doing. We can change current command, but current command doesn't ever get put back into the character commands array. It basically pulls out all the data of one instance of the structure, uses it for what it's needed for, and then gets rid of it. So character command 0 would remain unchanged if we changed current command inside of this loop. Okay? So, but in this case, we need to change it. We need to set it to false once this is done. So that's why we have to call set array elem after we set the members in it, instead of just grabbing this, doing a for each loop, and then setting the array element. We got to set the member back to false, and then we got to put it back in the array. Make sense? Index comes from your array index. Just again, item comes from your set members in command, the struct out. I know the white box is kind of going over it, but you can see struct out goes into item. Again, the target array comes from the character commands. Size to fit doesn't matter right now. And there you go. So now you'll reset that element in the array to the new value we set, which is everything the same except has use command, which we're setting to false. And then when the loop is completed, this is what I just changed a second ago, go ahead and call reset variables with it, just to make sure everything's getting reset that we need. Also important, you can now remove your has used temp command boolean that we were setting in here. So feel free to get rid of that now since we're not going to be using it anymore. Then, when you're playing your game, and I'll open up this, you can now go over, and I'll open up the output log so you guys can read it to make sure everything's working as expected. I'll clear it. Okay, let me move this a little bit over. If I walk over to my opponent and call ABC, you can see it says, there's a lot of logs here because we've got just a lot of logs in general here, and it's through every loop it logs these, but you can see I added A, B, C. It added them to the command sequence, and then the character is using the command number 1. Now it's important to note, it continued to loop through the other command anyway, which I was going to take out, but the thing is there are some commands in games, notably I'm thinking of Street Fighter, where the commands are actually the same, like plus an additional input, and they do a different version of that attack. So if you wanted to do something like that, you could leave it this way without canceling the other loops, but then set like how important some values were. Like, give the attacks weight, so if they do another action, it can override the attack you're currently doing. We'll talk about that later. We might not get into that specifically, but it's just a thought, if you had that in mind. That's how I would set it up. But anyway, we're going to continue now. So you can see I put ABC, and it worked, and it used the correct attack. Now if I do ABD, you can see I use a different attack, and then also... And sorry, it didn't update because I was reading that, so we'll do it again. So if you see I do ABD right here, and this comes from when I hit left shift to exit the window. You see it still was grabbing my input, but right here's where we're looking. So I added my inputs. It said I added 2 inputs, AB. The player broke the command sequence because I pressed D, and this was looking at index 1, remember. So index 1 of the character commands is ABC. So it grabbed A and B and then said, wait a second, D is not right, break. And then we're in index 2 now. We add our inputs to the command sequence A, B, D, and then we say, okay, the character is using command 2. And then we use command 2. ABC, and then ABD. ABC, ABD. And sorry, this again isn't updating because I was at a fixed location. Let me do that one more time for you. ABC, ABD, ABC, ABD. There you go. And that's how you can do character commands. And now we can have as many as we want. I mean, you know, I haven't stress tested this past 5, but you can go ahead and add as many as you'd like and see how it works. You only have so many anyway. Like, you're not going to have like 50, 60 commands, right? I think the most attacks I ever saw on a character was about 70, and I think that was close to Chun-Li. It might have been Chun-Li, it was something like that, but they weren't all commands, right? Like half of them are basic attacks and movements and stuff. So you're not going to have like probably more than 20 commands. I think even that's probably too much, but I don't know, it depends on the game, so feel free to do whatever you want with it. But there you go, guys. So that's my take on how to do multiple commands in your all of your characters, so that you can perform different inputs to perform different moves. Anyway, guys, if this video helped you, please subscribe. It assists me more than anything else you can do for the channel, and it just really lets me know that you guys are enjoying it and that I'm doing a good job teaching you. And if you did have any issues with this video or any of my other videos, I know they get pretty complex here, especially when we get into all this input buffer stuff. Feel free to join the Discord. I can't put a link to an iCard anywhere, because YouTube doesn't like Discord links, but you can look in the description and find it. We just have a good time talking in there. We talk about whatever, about streaming, gaming, and mostly the programming tutorials, but it's a community open to everyone, so feel free to join and hang out. Lastly, guys, if you want to come support me on Twitch, twitch.tv/Shawnthebro27. You can come check us out while we play Dark Souls on Wednesday, Resident Evil on Friday. Have a really good time, and a lot of you have been coming over from YouTube and saying hello and giving us some support. So I just want to bring that up, and thank you so much. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. On the next one, we'll finish up input buffers for now. We will do the actual like inputs coming down from the screen, like left, up, right, A, B, whatever. We'll have symbols for them, and they'll actually appear as a stat coming down the screen, like as if you were in a practice mode. Okay, guys, that's it for me. So again, I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, my friends.